Joe Mullings from 160 Studios in Delray Beach. Good to be here today. And my guest is Martha Shadan. Martha, thanks for joining us today.
Great. It's a pleasure to be here, Joe. Thank you.
So Martha is chair of the Accel board at AdvaMed, chair of the IND committee, and also sits on the AdvaMed board. Clearly a strong supporter of the AdvaMed initiative within the medtech industry. Martha, what can you share about AdvaMed and why are you a member? Let's start there.
Okay, well, thank you for that question, Joe. So AdvaMed Accel is the division of AdvaMed dedicated to the needs of smaller medical technology manufacturers. So we define small companies as companies with revenues less than 100 million in sales. Really, the majority of the small company members are either pre-revenue or have revenues significantly below 100 million. So small companies represent about 70% of AdvaMed's members. So we are a very large percentage. And for instance, Miach Orthopaedics, I'm the President CEO of Miach, we're pre-revenue. So as a small company, I don't have the resources or necessarily the in-house expertise to stay current on all policies that could impact us. Hiring consultants to help us navigate is extremely expensive, as you probably can guess. So as an Accel member, we get timely, accurate, and important regulatory reimbursement and compliance updates to help inform our strategies and plans. And this was never more important, Joe, than when COVID-19 hit. And the situation was evolving by the day, and sometimes it felt even by the hour. So what happened was AdvaMed quickly created an online resource to provide its members timely and accurate updates on everything COVID, policies, programs that would impact the medtech industry. So it was a terrific resource for small companies such as myself to be able to go to one spot and get the latest information on COVID. And in addition, what happened was AdvaMed convened several task groups, one of which was a task group specifically to deal with the impact of small companies and our unique needs. And as you know, prior to COVID, it was already challenging for small companies to access capital, right? The pandemic just exacerbated this issue, disproportionately impacting small companies in many ways. So in the task group, we focused on ways to provide economic stimulus for small medtech companies, building on and accelerating work that we'd already started prior to COVID. And as a result, you may know of the IGNITE Act, was introduced to monetize NOLs and provide for R&D tax credits. The other thing is, you know that there was in the early days, and there still is, but an acute shortage of PPE. Large companies, although they were challenged in procuring PPE, they had the supply chain infrastructure to be able to procure what they needed in a timely manner. That wasn't true for us, for small company members. We had the same need for PPE to ensure business continuity, but individually we lacked the purchasing power to procure PPE at reasonable prices and in a reasonable time frame. So I'll just give you a little example. I personally was on the internet, specifically eBay, at 11 p.m. and midnight, night after night, trying to get disinfectant wipes, masks, gloves for my employees. I became really good at it, but that wasn't the best use of my time. So with Andrew Steiner and others from AdvaMed, they stepped up and we launched the PPE sourcing program within a matter of a few weeks. So it allowed small companies like myself and even some of the medium-sized companies to purchase PPE at very reasonable prices because AdvaMed had negotiated a group purchasing price for many of the items that we need. So COVID just, AdvaMed did an extraordinary job stepping up during COVID. But just a couple other points I'd like to make. I see them as a convener for the entire ecosystem. We've pulled together a core team of corporate development executives to better understand the evolving landscape with regards to M&A. With AdvaMed's events and education team, they've implemented a virtual partnering system, and we started these partnering events in the summer, in the height of COVID. Because we're small, in other organizations, we wouldn't necessarily have a seat at the table, right? But in AdvaMed, we're as important as the large companies. We are treated no different than large companies. We have access to the same benefits as Medtronic or Johnson & Johnson or others. And then finally, in addition to everything I just mentioned, membership in AdvaMed is simply the most effective way to connect with other MedTech CEOs. Just a quick example. Last week, I had a question about an expense platform that could not only handle employee expenses, but was Sunshine compliant. So I sent an APB out to a group of Accel CEOs and had my answer by the end of the day. Wow. So it was a really effective, efficient way to share best practices. And I would say that this benefit is best expressed by one of our Accel members. She said, in our companies, we have multiple advisors. We have board of directors, scientific advisory boards, clinical advisory boards, but we don't have personal advisory boards for the CEO. And AdvaMed Accel is kind of my personal advisory board when I need an outside perspective or shortcut to get to where I need to be faster and avoid some of the speed bumps. So in summary, I would say that there are clear, tangible benefits to membership with AdvaMed and Accel, and equally as important to me and others as a small company CEO are the intangibles we enjoy from the community.
And that's pretty powerful because, Martha, your career has brought you through companies like Zimmer, Covidien, Rotation, which you transacted as well. Smith & Nephew, you sat, I believe during that acquisition, you sat within Smith & Nephew for a while, and now you went back out to the emerging tech world with Miach as president and CEO. What has you keep going out to the small companies, starting them up, building incredible value, and having the strategics come in? And it clearly sounds like, as you pointed out, AdvaMed is an asset to that for you along the way.
Yeah. So, I think it's important. Most of my career path has been on the large company side, right? But, in the course of my career, it became increasingly more important. And as I, got more experience, I got a little bit smarter. But for me, being in an environment that is high energy, very innovative, and is open to possibilities, and not to say large companies aren't, because I had a terrific career with large companies, but I find that the nimbleness and the ability to make decisions quicker and explore things in a way that we might not be able to in a large company, that's really appealing and attractive to me. I'm an entrepreneur at heart, and so small company environment offers me the ability to enjoy that entrepreneurial spirit with maybe less restrictions on how we operate.
Got it. You've had a career that's also had a influence in the orthopedics market and with rotation and Zimmer. And I know you also were either advisor or sat on the board of Illuminas at one point in time. You're still connected with them, which is a very unique technology. What do you see for the future of ortho as we look at it today, and where could it possibly really stretch the tech envelope?
Yeah. So let me start by stating the obvious, which is COVID's impact this year on the industry has been significant, not only US, but globally, right? And many orthopedic procedures are elective, as you know, and when COVID hit, many elective procedures were deferred. Although the orthopedics market is very resilient, I think we will continue to see disruptions the remainder of this year and into the first half of next year. My opinion. Having said this, I think we're going to see, and we are seeing a rebound to pre-pandemic levels in many regions of the US in ortho. It's regional dependent, but I would say that continued recovery is highly dependent on patient confidence during this pandemic and their willingness to get procedures. So there's still a fair number of patients who are waiting until next year to get their procedure. And the issue with waiting is that although many of these procedures are considered what we call elective, it doesn't mean they're optional. There's a finite time when these procedures can be delayed before there are clinical consequences. I think that COVID, so that's one impact of COVID and on the industry. I think the underlying fundamentals for the orthopedic industry are still there. The aging population, the prevalence of progressive diseases, people staying active longer, all of that is continuing to be true. So I have no doubt that this industry, the medtech industry and orthopedics will continue to rebound and will be strong. I do think that COVID has also brought opportunities for orthopedic companies that in a funny way has caused us to rethink how we engage and support our customers. I think there are tremendous opportunities to consider alternative ways to engage and train our customers. So, for example, at Miach, we expect FDA approval soon, and we've been building our commercialization strategy. And prior to COVID, we were heading down the traditional path where, we would hire a certain number of reps to cover a certain geography, to cover a certain number of accounts, would build our training plans largely around in-person training, all the traditional approaches. But our plans have shifted in response to potentially having limited physical access to the OR, to proctor cases, and train our surgeons. And so right now, we're in the midst of planning a hybrid approach, both virtual and face-to-face interactions. And what we're realizing is potentially this new model could provide broader access at a lower cost to Miach.
Yeah, no doubt. And large part of the industry is realizing that now. You've got companies like InTouch, you've got AdvaMed Systems, you've got Proximie, right. All of these virtual engagement, whether it's sales, scrub-in, proctoring, or just typical clinical to clinical engagement, education. Just think about all the students who are in med school who can't get into the OR anymore. So I agree 100%. It's during this time that there are going to be tremendous gaps in the point of engagement with both customer, patient, and clinician. So spot on with that.
Yeah, I think that, from my perspective, the companies who get in front of this will potentially be the winners. Yeah. I think it's important to recognize that there are changes. These trends were evolving pre-COVID, and I think they're just accelerating because of the impact from COVID. But I think that, there's opportunities here to do things in a new, innovative way that could be better for the patients and our customers, and better for the companies.
Yeah, the economics are going to make sense because it wasn't really tenable. We all know it was about a fifth of our GDP on the healthcare side we were burning through, and that was not a sustainable situation. And as you pointed out, the aging population is just going to put a broader burden upon the healthcare system. So this was a much needed situation.
Yep.
I want to slide over to something that I know is important to everybody in the industry, and you've been leading the way, but you also chair the Diversity and Inclusion Committee for AdvaMed, and is a founding member of the Leadership Circle for the Women's Executive Network, and clearly a multi-transactional CEO in the emerging tech side of things. So where are we versus where we should be on females, diversity, and specifically female leadership in the medtech industry?
Yeah. So the short answer is we are not even close to where we should be, right? And this is a really important topic. So the issue, if you look at it, Joe, is not at the entry-level positions. When you look at, and we'll just talk gender right now, racial diversity is a very big issue as well. But let me just talk gender. If you look at the entry-level positions, there's about a 50-50 split between male and female, all right? The problem is this: as the position scope and responsibility increases, you start seeing this very big divergence between male and female. So if it's 50-50 at entry level, by the time you get to the C-suite, it's 80-20. 80% weighted to men and 20% to women. And so there's lots of reasons for that. And this isn't, by the way, this isn't particular to the medtech industry, but it is a problem with medtech. And we are lagging when we consider the number of women and racially diverse candidates who hold positions in the C-suite and CEO levels. And, you know, why is this important? Well, it's important because, and there have been lots of studies that reinforce this, that when you have a diverse workplace, it improves employee engagement, it improves innovation. Companies that are more diverse are better innovators. And therefore you're good for patients. And the other thing that has been researched and shown is that actually business performance improves. And it's not necessarily about male and female, although that's a big contributor. It's about creating diversity of thought and having enough people around the table that think differently to be able to debate and question and discuss issues from a diverse set of context. There have been, you know, when I started my career, as I moved up in the ranks, it was not unusual for me to be the only vice president, female vice president. And it troubles me that as I speak to other women executives, they have the exact same story. Yet women make up, you know, a large portion of the workforce, but they're underrepresented. Mm-hmm. So it's a big problem. So I think, to answer your question, the first thing is that the medtech industry needs to recognize, and is recognizing, that there is an issue. And in recognition of this issue, AdvaMed has created an initiative called AdvaMed Advance. You may know about it, excuse me, And the goal is to make the medtech industry the industry of choice for diverse talent. So I have, as you mentioned, I chair this initiative for AdvaMed. And together with Kevin Lobo, who's the chair of AdvaMed, and other CEOs of large, medium, and small companies, we've made this a key initiative and created a call to action. So as an industry, we recognize the benefit of creating a diverse workplace, as I mentioned. We also have started and support an organization called WEN. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's the Women's Executive Network. Mm-hmm. And that's co-chaired by two of our AdvaMed member company executives, Tracy McNeil and Amanda De Palma. And the mission of WEN is to elevate and connect women with other women in medtech. So from the industry perspective, in partnership with AdvaMed, we're starting important work to bring awareness to the issues and to provide tools to enable our member companies to advance diversity, both gender and racial, in the companies. So I think that we're on a journey where we're not where we want to be or need to be, but I think that the first step, creating this recognition, has been very important, and the call to action has been started. So that's, we're there, we're starting it, right? And there's a lot more work. There's a lot of passion and effort around this initiative at AdvaMed.
So I've got a question for you, Martha, and I'm sure you may have had to navigate it, and a lot of young women are going to have to navigate it. And I've got young women who are just starting their families in my organization who have sat down with me and say, Joe, I want to start a family as well, but I also want my career. So guidance to companies that are providing opportunities, let's stay on females for now, but a young woman decides that she also wants to have a family. And so she gets out of university, it starts 50-50 there, and 5 years into it, she says, okay, it's time for me to start my family. I'm going to have some children. How does a company potentially allow that individuals to start their family, pay the attention to it that it needs to, but also allow her to remain strong, independent from a career perspective, and give her an on-ramp back to the workplace, and just a fair shot on goal. No handouts, a fair shot on goal. So how does that happen? How do organizations work around that?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And I love what you just said, because women in general don't want an advantage. They want equity. They want to be treated in a similar way to men. And they don't want starting a family to impact their careers in a different way than it would for a man. So let's start there. I think that when I started my career, it was a tough, situation. I have two children. I was getting my MBA in the midst of being pregnant with my first child, my son. And I had started a small business, baking business with two other women, and I was working full-time in sales in a medtech company, right? So I would say that you need to believe in yourself, one, right? And you need to be resilient. So that's from the woman's side. And I think that if you want it, you advocate for it, right? And you don't take no. And you need to be obviously true to yourself, but and be authentic, but don't let your inner voice dissuade you from reaching for what you want, right? At times it feels extremely daunting, but you can't let that stop you. So it starts with the woman and her belief in herself and how well she advocates for herself. Okay, so let's put that on one side. On the company side, I think this is one of the things we're exploring as part of AdvaMed Advance, which is to recognize that women have unique, challenging issues, and that that needs to be recognized within the company. So there is starting to be more flexibility in terms of how you work, working remotely, working longer days, less days. So companies are starting, I wouldn't say we're there yet, Joe, but they're starting to recognize there needs to be flexibility. And talk about opportunities coming out of COVID. What are we starting to see? Mm-hmm. That people can work remotely and in different ways and still be productive, right? So if we're, out of this horrible situation, there's some great lessons we're learning, which will only just serve, people well and companies well as we go forward. It would be a shame if companies lost very capable women because of an inflexibility in being able to accommodate certain needs that women have versus others. And so I think that there is some opportunities there. I know that, when I was coming up through the ranks, even talking about being pregnant set you on this different path, right? If that still exists in the company that you're in, I would ask that person to decide whether that's the right organization for them, and make a decision about what they need versus what the company can provide for them. But I do think that there is more discussion happening, Joe, about these kind of issues. And not that things are happening as fast as we want them to from those discussions, but I think just the fact that those conversations are happening are tremendous. I also think that as CEOs find AdvaMed Accel and AdvaMed to be a great convener and a opportunity for networking, I think women's organizations within companies are starting to pop up more frequently. And I think that we learn from each other.
Agreed.
And women should be having those conversations with each other to not only support, but to raise us all up.
Yeah, and you bring up a great point earlier. You said it, and you said, don't take no, right? One of the things that, is just proven over time is women are more agreeable than men. Men can be absolutely pig-headed, and women tend to and are brought up to be more agreeable than less agreeable. And I will tell you that if you're able to stick to your guns, figure out your career path, demand the opportunity, not the outcome, demand the opportunity. Right. If you're going to start a family or make a selection, go back to school and re-engage, stop being so damn agreeable, and advocate for yourself, demand it, just equal shot on goal, and that's it.
Yeah, just to add a point to what you said, Joe, and I love what you just said, there's reports out there that show that if there is a position posted, males and females perceive that position in very different ways. So a male will look at the requirements, the job requirements, and if they have about 80% of what's being asked, they go for it. Women look at that same position and say to themselves, I don't have everything they need. Right. And many times won't even apply because they're assuming that they're not qualified. We got to go in there with, again, being true to ourselves and being authentic and believing that we can do that job The men are assuming in many cases that they're going to learn on the fly. Well, we're just as capable, right? We can learn on the fly, but we don't give ourselves permission to do that.
Agree. Well, Martha, this is great. Such sage advice. You're a role model and a standing inspiration to people in medtech in general, but especially women in medtech. I appreciate your time today, and thank you so much for sharing with us all the different areas of AdvaMed that might not be as obvious to others.
Thank you, Joe.
Stay safe, and I will see you at the show.
Yes, absolutely.
Right.
You too.
Be well. This is Joe Mullings from 160 Studios. Take care.